Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to this
Recording in progress.
Committee of the Whole on November 2nd. We are meeting this month for the first and third Wednesdays due to the holiday. We have Council Member Jacob, Council Member Worthen is online, Council Member Whitelock, Council Member Bloom, Council Member Pack, and Council Member McConaughey. I believe Councilmember Green will be coming. He said he would be coming. So when he gets here, we'll let you know that he's here. This evening, the first item on our work session agenda is ordinance number 2230, amending the 2009 West Jordan City Code, basically cemetery decorations. This is a item that came before us once before, and we had some input that we gave, and now you have the code in your packet. Is there any discussion on this item? Anything further that we want to maybe tweak in this? I can't see who's there. If you have anything, chime in. I know we have the sexton here. Do you have anything you want to give to us? Share? You can come up and share if you'd like, because nobody's jumping on their lights. The right.
Okay. I believe we sent the changes that I'm pretty sure I covered everything that was discussed and made adjustments.
Yep, we've got the bench in here. We've got the decorations have been altered so that you could have pinwheels and such. Still no glass, but a little more user friendly.
And I added the thing for the Veterans Monument.
Yes.
That it'll be approved upon. If somebody calls and wants that approved, then it's automatically approved, I guess. For lack of better words, but so we added that.
It's included in the code as a permitted. Yes. Okay. Councilmember Bloom.
I'm curious how you feel about the changes. Are you okay with all the changes? I know you went through it all, but I want to know how you feel and how it's going to affect the workload and everything.
Yeah, I feel like we made a pretty good compromise and came to a pretty good agreement that's going to work for everybody. Yeah, I feel good about it. Yeah.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Question for legal.
He's coming. We have a legal question if anyone's available. Okay. He's right there. Mr. Wall is coming in.
So, Mr. Wall, as we're talking about the things that are okay to bring as decorations to the cemetery, grave decorations are limited to flowers, artificial flowers, and national and military flags. Are we going to get in trouble if we say flags, but only of a certain type? Yeah, we're national and military. If there's another type, for example, let's say there's a former mayor that's laid to rest in our city cemetery, city flag would be prohibited. Or flags of other types. Are we going to get in trouble? I'm just thinking free speech. You mentioned before that we can limit the type and the place, but not necessarily the content. And it seems like we're endorsing flags, but we're limiting the content. So that I'm kind of wondering about just leaving it as flags and removing the two qualifiers, if that's something that would be.
Well, it would definitely mitigate any potential claims if we did not qualify it. Let me think about that for a few minutes.
So, if I can chime in on that, I understand what you're saying, but then that also opens up the door for them to bring in. They put them on, not really a shepherd hook, but it's a taller hook that you can put
like
different kinds of flags on.
Oh, flowers and stuff and garden
right.
Decorations.
So that's where we run in. I feel we run into a bit of an issue with just saying flags, because then that opens up the door for these other types of decorations that wouldn't be allowed.
I'm sure it's in here, but how long somebody comes puts a flag on a grave site? How long does it stay there?
So we do have in there,
What day did they put it there? And then you'll know.
if you look at
It's removed on Tuesday. Well, then
Yeah.
it might get taken off if they got there before the cemetery
Okay,
people.
Wednesday.
yeah,
So maximum.
unless
6
it's a
days.
holiday, then it would be the following. They would be there for a week. Then the following Tuesday following the
They're
holiday.
removed every Tuesday. So
Yeah.
so literally the worst case scenario, somebody puts the most offensive flag or problematic flag you can, it's gone in 6 days.
At the worst.
Yeah. Okay.
And if it's something that I see that I feel is inappropriate, then obviously I'm going to remove it immediately.
Right. If you see
Yeah.
it before
Yeah,
that Tuesday,
yeah,
right?
yes, yes.
Chair Whitelock,
Yes.
I had a thought, if I could share it with you. I would want to look at this, but my initial reaction now is those plots are purchased, aren't they?
Yes.
They're owned by individuals.
Yes.
So the plots themselves are not a public forum, they're private property.
Well, you buy the burial rights to it, so to speak.
Okay,
Councilmember
Yeah.
Green has joined
It's still
us.
city property, but you buy the
Okay.
basic. From what I understand of what it says in the certificate that we
Yeah.
give to people when they buy it, it basically says that you buy the burial rights to that piece of property, not the
Okay.
actual property
Okay.
itself.
I guess I want to look at that certificate,
Okay.
see what the interest is that we're conveying. Because I think you could, depending on what it says, I think we could take the position that it is the bundle of sticks of the property. It's private property, and we could take the position that we can't and shouldn't control that, and that would relieve you and the city of liability for people who don't like a flag or want to make an issue out of it. But I want to look, I'd like to look at that
Okay.
and see.
Councilmember Pat.
Thank you. Yes, with that in mind, who is the arbiter of figuring out what appropriate decorations are? That's the new wording. Would that be the sexton? Because that would extend to more than just flags in understanding what appropriate decorations are. Because the reason for this, as in the packet, it states that there's safety concerns. So can you give us kind of an idea of what exactly is the safety concern? I can understand making it more easily maintained.
Sure. So, for instance, the shepherd's hooks that people like to put out by their graves that they hang their flowers on, that would be an example of a safety concern. I had about a year and a half. I had a sexton from Provo call me, getting information of what our policy was on shepherd's hooks, because they're finding out that some of their staff is being, as they're driving by on their mowers, they're being injured by these shepherd's hooks, getting caught on their shoulders or getting caught on their, if they hit it in the eye or something like that. So that glass is another reason why we don't have it. If it gets broken, then obviously it can become a safety concern. So
Okay, would we need to be more specific in what appropriate decorations are then and make that more?
Sorry to
Detail.
butt in here. I apologize, I wasn't here during the first discussion. The bigger challenge and discussion that we had about the cemetery is the safety concerns, not necessarily the specific decorations, but some other things that we've experienced out there besides the ones Kelly has mentioned is a lot of families take pride in the grave, and they've taken upon themselves to decorate more than just what the headstone is. So then you've got pieces of glass, rocks, and other things that they decorate the entire footprint of the grave. Wire fencing, Christmas trees, solar lights in around the graves.
Don't forget pinwheels.
Christmas packages that were there for 90 days.
yeah.
So a portion of it is, the bigger concern is safety. The shepherd hooks have poked other staff at other facilities, caused injury. I don't know if you guys know this, but in the last 6 months, we've paid out over 12 claims just for broken windows or damaged vehicles as weed eaters or maintaining things around the park strips and things of the city. So for the one that I'm referring to, when they decorate the grave with rocks around it, when we're trying to edge, they've made this new challenge for us that they're the perfect size that if a weed eater hits that, it's going to chuck it and hit somebody or something potentially. So our intent isn't to limit decorations, but to control the aesthetics and the safety of the situation and the facility.
Vice Chair Green.
Rob, this is more directed at you. And I agree with the safety concerns, but here's the question. What the heck was the guy's name in Town v. Gilbert? The guy that was the other dude. You know which case I'm talking about, right? Messages have to, if we're going to restrict something, it has to be content neutral. Here's the real, this goes back to a question that I think I agree with the city attorney Wall about reading the certificates, because if there's a couple of issues here. If we've allowed this and we've allowed different kinds of decorations for the last several years that have specific messaging, and I'm talking about Christmas tree box versus a Hanukkah, is if we say no, you can't have a Christmas tree present, all of a sudden we're into some content-based stuff dealing on potentially public property. If it's private property, okay, we're dealing with it. But either way we regulate it, I think we have to get into an extremely content neutral environment, that when what Councilmember Pack says is what is appropriate, I think we have to define. Rob, am I going off on too far something to say what we have to do is do it content neutral, and it has to be on safety and particular the articulation of certain safety issues as opposed to messaging and those kind of things?
So,
go ahead.
let me
ahead.
say something here. I think the issue is the appropriate, and really what I think maybe it needs to say is, and decorations not to exceed 18 inches in height with something with safety in mind, because that's really what I hear from staff saying is, look, we need things that are safe. And I think it is appropriate for staff to determine if it's safe or not. You know, if there's rocks around it, if there's glass around it, if there's sharp objects that can become projectiles and hurt someone, those are safety issues as well as litigation issues. So I think we're probably going to need to remove appropriate.
Yeah,
Council,
if the focus is on safety and ability to maintain the cemetery, those are all legitimate reasons, and I think they would pass any test. My question to the council would be, if you're wanting to regulate messages, why and what messages? And then if there is a desire, I'll take a look at what we could.
I don't think that was the desire of the council.
Okay.
I don't think that was the desire.
No, but I think the thing is what's appropriate. And I think that what we probably ought to do as opposed to appropriate is maybe better define appropriate as not, and take the word out and talk about staff can establish regulations regarding safety, not leave the discretion to what is appropriate, if you know where I'm going.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you. The other one I wanted to ask about was at the very bottom.
Before you go there, do I have four that want appropriate out?
Appropriate and military.
Yeah,
and
the
national has to
fixing
come
the
out too.
the description of the flag. So just saying flags are okay.
Okay, so we want it to say artificial flowers, flags, and decorations not to exceed 18 inches in height, and then we're okay with something that says safety of items will be determined by sexton, something like that. Yes. Okay.
What line, excuse me, Chair White, like what line is
Yes.
that you're looking at?
That is line 12 and 13.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
I'm gonna be the,
Hang on. Do you want to say no to one of those?
yes.
What do you want to say no to?
Look, I am a military guy. I like flags. I want flags. If we say flags and just flags, first off, I think I think there's a description about height there. I'm trying to get
18
there.
inches in height.
Right. So we can have an 18-inch flag, but is that 18-inch American flag, or is that an 18-inch German flag? Is that an 18-inch KKK flag? Is that an 18-inch whatever flag? And if we're comfortable with doing that, and I think we have to have flags I think we have to have U.S. flags because that's what you do to recognize veterans and those killed in action, and I'm not going to denigrate that. But Rob, the question is, if we say flags, or because this is, and this goes back to something that you're going to look into, but can we say United States flag and restrict it solely to United States flags, the current one that's adopted under U.S. flag code, or does that leave us open for something that we don't want in the cemeteries or might be inappropriate? That's, Rob, you got any answers to that?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I think you could restrict it to the United States flag. I don't know if you want to do that as a public policy, but I think legally you could. The current language I'm looking at there, national and military, I could fly a Russian flag. I could fly a swastika. I could fly the rebel flag. Those are national and or
At
military
18
flags.
inches, I don't think you're flying it too high.
No, you're not. But my point is, I'm not sure you want to say any. If you want to limit it to U.S. flags, you could do that.
Okay.
But if you want to limit it, you're gonna have to be very narrow, very specific, very narrow in what you limit.
Okay, so council, I need to know what we want to do on flags. What do we want to have any kind of flag? If you do, kind of give me an indication. I see
Any
one,
kind of
I see
flag.
two. Any kind of flag is good. Three.
Any kind of flag is
I think we're comfortable
appropriate.
with any flag, and then I think it becomes like any other issue in the city, right? If someone in their home puts up something that a neighbor doesn't like, they call code enforcement, and it's dealt with that way. And you might be code enforcement in the
Yeah, and
cemetery.
Well,
that's,
but
that's
if-
fine. I guess my question is, so if you have the two different spectrums, if I allow somebody to put a rainbow flag up, I'm allowed to let somebody put up a rebel flag. Is that
Yes.
what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Well, that's
No,
what.
and that's
yeah,
that-
you've
I'm
got
just
it.
making-
You've
I'm
got
just getting
4 or more
clarity.
that say yes. So
Okay.
yes.
What I want
So-
to make sure, what I want to make sure of is that the city's response then is, and Rob, you know where I'm going.
I do.
That the city's response then is somebody calls and says, why did you allow a swastika, or why did you allow the Japanese rising sun or the Japanese war flag or whatever the heck? Our response is, we allow any flag regardless of the message, and you have to, I think we have to understand that that's where we're going.
Okay.
And that if somebody calls and complains, we just tell them life's tough and then you die. I think that's
Okay.
where we have to be, right,
Well,
Rob?
everybody has the right to express their,
All right.
Okay.
Let's move on. Sorry, Councilmember McConaughey. I thought it'd be quicker. Go ahead.
Okay, so the other one I want to talk about very last, 102, Veterans Medallions. Any medallion issued through the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs to a person who has served in one of the 5 branches of the U.S. military shall be allowed to be affixed to said person's headstone. As I read that, I kind of flashed back to when my family spent some time in Australia, and I'm trying to find the picture. Where did it go? It caught my attention because there was a headstone that I saw that had a United States Marine Corps medallion down in Tasmania, of all places. Kind of caught me off guard. This is the marker for Sergeant Michael Edward Bitts. It reads, faithfully devoted Christian son and Marine husband, killed in action in Iraq, March 23rd, 2003. Semper Fidelis. It was an interesting experience being down there and seeing that just as we're walking through. An American Marine laid to rest in Australia, and this was also right around Veterans Day. And I didn't realize how much of an impact our allies have had as there have been different undertakings in different countries. I would hope that if somebody were to serve in the Australian military, but they were laid to rest here, they'd be able to have that similar medallion commemorating their service. So when I read that, I wanted to see if it's possible to broaden that, so it's not strictly not so tightly restricted to just here.
Okay.
I don't know how to word that because it's
Yeah,
very well done.
Honestly, I just looked up the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and I didn't, I was just thinking of the military here.
So
Didn't cross my mind of that.
council,
That's a good point.
are there 3 more? 1,
Yes.
2, 3? Okay.
Okay.
By the
Here,
way, there's
Whitelock.
6 branches of the U.S. military.
Just a question on that. What is the thinking? I'm not being critical, just curious. What's the thinking behind regulating what medallions can go on a grave marker?
So here's why, Rob. Can I jump in? Because I've done the research on this, because I've looked at one for my dad and I've been really lazy in getting this done. The requirement from Veteran Affairs to get the medallion is that you have to have permission from the cemetery
Oh, okay.
to affix it. So the idea would be here is that we're putting it in code so that no matter who has to approve that would automatically understand that it's West Jordan's policy that we don't argue whether because apparently there are some cemeteries that have, is that our policy is that, yes, we allow that veteran seal to be affixed. If we need to expand this to Veterans Affairs and I don't know what the heck Veterans Affairs or equivalent or something like that. But the ultimate intent of putting that line in there is so that the families know that when they're bringing that thing that has to be signed by the cemetery, that they know that they're not going to go through bureaucratic hassle to get it signed.
So what I'm hearing is this isn't eliminating the fact that someone from another country can't necessarily get permission.
That was my
It's
point.
just saying we're making sure we're covering our bases to make it easier for that. Is that that's actually what I'm hearing?
Okay, we may want to tweak this a little bit to make it clear that we're not precluding other types of medallions.
Right.
Because I'll give you an example. And I don't know as well as I do Councilmember Green's affiliation because he talks about it. What if he wanted to have a U of U logo, a medallion on his grave marker?
BYU Cougar?
Actually, I
No,
went to the U. I'm
so-
a university alumni. So.
But families have family crests, and there's all kinds of things that someone may want to put a medallion on a.
And to the point, the headstone is owned by the family, so they can put whatever they want on there. The difference with that versus the military one is it's the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. They're the ones that's requiring the cemetery sexton sign off. So
Right.
if someone wanted to put a U of U medallion on it, they could. They don't need to get permission from the U of U to do it. Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
so that's,
Just don't want anybody to interpret this because we didn't say other medallions also. That means that they can't be.
Well,
When you
and-
call out one, the implication is you're precluding others.
right.
And
So
Rob,
let
you
us
may
look at
be
that.
right. This may be just some tweaking
Just
in the
tweak a little bit.
language,
Yeah.
but really the intent
Thank
is
you.
to get the city just to sign off on that. And if you didn't know, the difference between, what the difference is that Kelly's right. The family owns the headstone, right?
Right.
Well, what could happen is that the person actually requests a headstone from Veterans Affairs. And they put the veteran, and you can actually get a flat headstone. Some of you have seen those in cemeteries. You can get the one that you see at Arlington National Cemetery with the religious one, and those the family can get, and that becomes part of what the family gets from VA. When the family does their own headstone to recognize the veteran, the VA does the medallion. Does that make sense? Give you a historical context?
Yeah.
Yep, just
Yep.
didn't want us to
Go.
preclude something we weren't intending to preclude.
Councilmember McConaughey.
All right, and then last question. I
Yeah.
think you've covered this, but I just want to confirm.
Okay.
So my father's been laid to rest over at the cemetery, right? Just one. I'm not sure what they're called. One row east and a couple plots
Okay.
south. There was a relatively recent interment where they had kind of a metal little temporary marker. It was up for probably year and a half, somewhere in there, maybe even a little bit
Yeah.
longer due to COVID.
Yeah.
I wanted to I saw that that's gone and been replaced with a headstone. I wanted to make sure that for families who are waiting something a little more permanent, we still had the ability. And as I read this, it seems like we do, because it talks about markers and monuments, as long as they're approved by the cemetery sexton, they're able to go in. So if somebody wanted to do something like that was more temporary of nature, they'd be able to work with you, get something in there that's
Yes.
shorter
Yeah,
term.
and-
So we're not precluding something like
No,
that.
and I'm glad you brought that up because I've run into that quite a bit since
These are pricey.
with going through the COVID thing. The headstones, headstone manufacturers got so far behind. I mean, people are waiting 12 months to a year and a half to get their headstones. So I've had discussions with, these family members wanting to put something there. And so my answer to them is, if you can find something that you can put there, such as that metal thing that we can still do our maintenance around and not destroy it. You can't, don't just put a thing of silk flowers in the ground because we're going to destroy it. But if you can find something that is durable, that you can stick there until you get your headstone, then yes, I've been allowing people to do that as long as we can still get around it and not cause damage to anything.
Perfect. Thank you.
So,
That was
yeah.
my last item. I really appreciate the work that you put into this, trying to get direction from 7 different people going different directions, and some of us go 3 different directions
Right.
simultaneously. It's not an easy balancing act, but thank you for what you've done with this to bring it to this point. This is the cemetery is a very special location and has significant meaning to a lot of folks.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the time and effort going into making sure that we get things right, both for staff but for the families.
Yeah.
And you've done really, really well.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate everybody's feedback, and that's why we come here, so that we can get it right. So
Thank you. So we're going to have Mr. Wall's going to look at our deed for our cemetery. We're going to, we're not going to worry about that, but we are going to change the wording at the beginning so that it's just flags, and appropriate's going to disappear.
yeah,
Can I ask?
And we'll take a look at the
reword
medallion
for the
language
medallions.
Yeah,
also.
Can
Okay.
I ask a question?
if it's 2 minutes or less.
Okay, well,
Go ahead.
going back to what Councilmember McConaughey talked about with these temporary markers, right now we have headstones, it says stone, it says raised marker, and those temporary markers don't meet that. Now, we can have a sexton that says, no, I'm going to allow it, but would the better situation be to cover ourselves that we have a small section that says temporary markers or other markers that aren't in this that we can put and deal with safety because somebody else comes along and says, well, I don't like it. And there's nothing to back it in the ordinance, and I don't want to have to modify the ordinance every time we turn around. So I'm just asking, should we have a section on temporary markers in that section?
Are there three others that want something on there? One. Do you want to add a section for temporary markers?
In terms of a new section to the code.
Yeah.
Just,
Two.
just like a new letter would be nice, quick, saying, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, could you also add something to that effect for us, please?
And it's to make your job easier.
And I do want to note that Councilmember Worthen has left the meeting for a bit. Okay. I think we are done with that, so we will move on. Oh,
Okay.
Isaac, do you have something else?
Sorry, just to follow up. I don't know if you guys know this, but we're in the process of, with this code, we've run out of pamphlets for the cemetery. So we've printed some temporary ones with the old regulations on it. But is this something that will need to come back to you at the work session, or can we send this to you guys and then put it to the council meeting for approval?
I'm comfortable with it coming back
Business
to the
item.
meeting. Yeah,
Business item,
yeah, business
I'd
item.
just like to expedite it if
Yes.
we can to get the new rules
It can
out.
come back as a business item.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is the Drinking Water Master Plan update. It's very large, and I say this, but then, you know, there's always things that change. So, as my email indicated, if I don't want to close our work session tonight, I just want to recess it for our regular meeting, and then if it's not too late, we'll do a little more on the water, because this is a really important thing for years to come in our city. Mr. Davenport.
Thanks for letting me be here again today. Could you back up just a little bit? Keep going up. There, right there. No, down one more. Sorry, we don't have the clicker that moves the slides, so we're going to be working with Alan. Just as a reminder, this is where we left off last time, and as a reminder, this is a draft report, and I think as we've talked about before, our consultant can do a really good job at analyzing what our demands are, and he can do a really good job at looking at the existing system. He can even see the deficiencies that we're going to need in the future. But one thing that he's at a disadvantage of is, or they are at a disadvantage of, is to guess when and how we want to put in our new improvements. And so he can say, this is all the improvements I think you need, but he's just making guesses, educated guesses, but guesses when he says, this is when I think they should come. And as you look at this, right, he's taken the stuff we talked about in the previous meeting, and he has put it into a computer system, and he's modeled it for those conditions, the system pressure during a peak day, and seen if there's any deficiencies in our distribution system or our storage system or our transmission and source system. He's looked at it from peak day plus if there was a fire. And that's not in multiple zones, just in one area of our city. And then he's looked at the system during a peak day and what would the peak velocity be in all the pipes. And then he's also looked at what happens on a peak day to our storage reservoir. So he's looked at that and he's come up with a deficiency list. And he looked at that, by the way, not just for existing, but he also looked into the future, and he looked at the general plan that you guys are going to be looking at. And he said, if you followed your general plan, what would be the future deficiencies? What would we need to plan for? And he's come up with future improvements, and these are today dollars. They're not future dollars, but pipelines the city would need to invest $34 million into pipelines, another 12 million in pump stations, 82 in reservoirs, 1.5 in wells, and then 50 million in pipe replacement for those pipes that are breaking or are too old. Of the
Greg,
100,
out of those pipes, which ones are the ones that are needing to be replaced by 2025 for lead and copper?
lead and copper. Let me talk about lead and copper at the
Are
end.
they not?
But
Are
the
they in
50
these?
million, the $50 million, a lot of that is pipes that will probably be impacted by lead and copper.
Okay.
So when I talk about an age and a rehabilitation, those are pipes that are 60 years or older in our city. I think if we've talked about before, a ductile iron pipe in a good ground material can go somewhere between 50 and a little bit more. We're probably into bonus territory for some of these ductile iron pipes, and we're just lucky that they're still working properly. Those pipes that are this 70 and 50 years old, they're the ones impacted by lead and copper. So when we talk about lead and copper, you'll see everything from 1988 and below is questionable. And we'll have to do investigations and know if it has problems with lead and copper. Everything built after 1988 doesn't have any problems with lead and copper. So it's a specific, in most cases, it's a geographical area that I'm really concerned about, and it's in the older areas.
I have a question on these projections and proposed improvements. I'm looking at the chart on page 2-3, and the consultant used the West Jordan City TAZ population, which is the traffic analysis stuff from Wasatch Front Regional Council. What I'm concerned about is the model. Our population in 2020 was, if I'm not mistaken, is the population that they put down for 2025. Our population, according to the 2020 census, the last time I looked was about 116K. So when you look at this population projection and then tie that, our population projection and these numbers don't match up. And I'm wondering if we don't need to figure out and say our starting point is 116, because if we're trying to figure out that the next 5 years is going to take us to 116, I think we're a little bit behind the curve. Now, I get the fact that, and the other part of this that I have a problem with, and I don't know, I'm just a dumb council member, but traffic is not who lives here. I get that there's a traffic analysis, but it seems to me that the census data should have been more accurate, and using Wasatch Front traffic analysis zones is the traffic analysis zone, and the traffic analysis model seems to me it's throwing our numbers off. And so I'm concerned that if we're talking about system improvements and where we have to be, if we follow this model, we're already 5 years behind today. And so what does that mean to, at 116, moving to the 2030 number, to add 3,000 people in West Jordan City isn't going to take 10 plus years unless Wood Ranch and Jones Ranch decide that they're only going to build 20 houses. Do you know where I'm going?
But
So-
let me explain this before you get too worried about this. So there's two different things that we consider when we talk about utilities in the city of West Jordan, right? In West Jordan, our population is actually bigger than the number of customers we serve. And that's because part of our city is served by Kearns Improvement District. So when you see this number and you say, well, that's way lower than what the census has, well, that's because they haven't included the Kearns area in that. And there's a population that's not there. So the population should be close. But let me explain something else,
Okay.
Kelvin. So what they're trying to do here is find a rate of growth. So they're in the model, they've got an existing, and then they've got a future that's actually built out. So it's all that we possibly could have. And the question for them is, how fast are we going to get there? And they use that when they decide. And again, remember I told you, this is the strength that is the hardest for them when they make an educated guess. How fast are you going to need these improvements? Because for the pipelines, the pump station, the storage, and the well, those items, most of those are to serve future development, not existing development. So they're trying to decide, when are we going to need those? Now, most of those, just so you know, most of those we have to provide up front. So most of those things in the pipelines, pump stations, storage, a lot of, not all of them, but a significant amount of infrastructure is being actually added in the next 5 or 7 years to service some of the things that we've already approved. And so we've entered into agreements with Ivory to spend a lot of money. I think they're still trying to decide how much money that's going to be, and that's why you haven't seen an agreement here yet. And there's other developers who have also agreed to put money into, say, pipelines or other things, and they're doing it in ahead. So this is the consultant's best effort. So when they're using the TAS and they're looking at this, this is their best effort to try and guess growth. I'll be honest with you, I don't think any of our master plans ever have actually anticipated growth correctly in our city, because we're just so, it's just different. There are some times where we grow a whole lot, and there's sometimes where we grow just a little bit.
And I get that, but shouldn't we be able to take the population of West Jordan and subtract the current?
Yeah,
To
that's what
me-
they've done. That's what they have
Well,
done.
but they're using the Wasatch Front TAZ, and that seems like that's fuzzy math.
I think that, yeah.
You know, okay.
I think that, again, I think that they're not using that when they're coming up with a model number. I think they're really just trying to get to, or ERCs, because when we do an ERC, they don't look at how many people are in the house. They look at they look at how many houses are
Right.
there. When they look at the future properties, they're looking at how many homes could get approved here. And that's how they're coming up, not how many people are in those homes. That's not what they're looking at.
Okay, I'll just drop it, but I just think that when we're talking about growth rates, and, you know, we say, well, the next milestone in the growth rate is 2025 with 116,000, and the next model after that is 2030 with 119. We're going to hit 100. That's 10 years out, and we could hit. I mean, if you think about it, we're going to hit that 10-year model out in 3 or 4 years if construction goes right.
Right.
And so I'm just wondering if this projected model is flawed based on population counts, and did this take into consideration entitlements that have already been approved?
Why don't we do this? Because these are good questions. I've already got some questions from the Planning Commission and Kayleen. Let's take that down. We'll make sure that we get that. You can also email me these, and I will make the consultant answer those for you. So that I'll make them say this. I'll make them defend their work. Because remember, this isn't necessarily mine or Dave's work. We're just trying to present it for you today. I don't want to discount your concern, because I think it is valid. I think that you're right that that we'd want to be as precise as we can. I think they would be able to defend their work better than I would. So let's take that question. Let's make sure it gets answered before you see this for approval. Right. So, because today we're just here to discuss all this.
Right.
Let me make them answer your question.
Okay.
How many slides do you have? Because we didn't get through hardly any last time because we had lots to say. So how many do you have?
Sites.
Slides?
Oh, slides. I think we have like 4 more of
Okay,
these.
why don't you do those and then we'll go to questions, okay?
Okay. And remember, I want you guys to be happy with this report before it gets approved. So I don't want you to approve this master plan and think, oh, I just wish we would have had one more session to go over something like this. So if you have any questions that I can't answer today, let me know. I'll get back to you. If I need to come back another time, I'll just come back another time, because we're not stuck, but we're going to use this for 4 years. We should make sure that it's a good plan. Can you go to the next slide? Alan. I wanted to go through the slides, the projects that are really important. In this report, you're going to see a large number of projects, but these are the projects that are most important that I think that would interest you the most. I wanted to give you an update on those projects. The Zone 5 South Pipeline is from Old Bingham Highway, which is 102 South, all the way to 67 West and New Bingham Highway. That is already designed, and Boyer is actually constructing part of that right now. So that's one of those projects, that $4 million project, that's already in the budget, or not in the budget. That's an agreement that Ivory is going to pay for those works, and they're already doing that. The Zone 5 South Pipeline from New Bingham Highway up to the tank is in final design right now. The copper rim transmission line, and what that does is that links the north side of our city on 70th South from about 64 West all the way up to SR 111 and all the way down to 78. That's a pipeline that will provide a loop system in Zone 6 and for Zone 5. That is in preliminary design, and I think it'll be constructed sometime next year. The other one is the Zone 5 North Transmission Line. That is in conceptual design. There's an alignment that's actually been approved, and we're looking at getting some easements for that line right now through the Wood property. So those are big ticket items out of that list, and we're working through those. Some of those are in construction. Almost all of them have some design associated with them. Do you want to go to the next slide? Okay, good. All right, pump stations with that Zone 5 South tank and pipeline. There is a pump station that is in final design. It's basically 100% design. We're looking for some approval from the state. That will be the developer will be able to bid that out in January and start construction on that. The Zone 5 North pump station is under a conceptual design right now. And I have Zone 7 pump station on there. I don't know when that's going to come in, but it might be sooner than you think. I'm just giving you a heads up. I've had a lot of pressures lately in the west part of the city. Do you want to go to the next slide? I ran out of room, or I had to put one more tank on here, but the Zone 6 South Tank 2, we're under construction with that right now. That's the picture that's in that slide. They actually have one more pour left on the floor, and then they'll start building the walls of that tank. The wall should be completed sometime in the early spring, late winter, and the roof will be put on. They'll be wrapping that tank most likely next year around May.
Where's this at?
This is the second tank at the Zone 6 South site, which is off of New Bingham Highway, and it's just at our border between Copperton and West Jordan.
Is this the one we had? Never mind. Was this one we had kind of a fight over the border and stuff?
The South Jordan's right next to us, so
Yeah.
their tank is right next to this site on the
Okay.
other side, if you remember that.
Yeah.
And
all
their
right.
tank is in West Jordan, which is kind of unique. We don't always have our sister city
That's the one. That's what I was
in our city.
Their tanks in our city.
Right. Zone 5. So Zone 5 South is the design is in final. It's been approved by the state, and they're just working on a 100% design plan. Again, I also believe that one will be under construction in January. We have another tank for Pressure Zone 1 at Cemetery, and that is in final design right now, and we're trying to get right of way to complete that. I also believe that will be ready. I think that the right of way will take us a little bit of time, so it'll be in sometime in 2023, but I'm not sure quite when we'll bid that project. Zone 5 North, again, I don't know when we'll do that exactly, but we're in a conceptual design right now for that. Zone 7 tank, I'm trying to give you all the stuff I think will happen in the next 5 years before the next master plan's adopted. You may have a Zone 7 tank not financed by the city in place in the next 5 years. I'm just giving you a heads up. You want to go to the next slide? We also are working on a new well, as I talked about before. The actual well casing is in the ground. It can support up to at least 500 gallons per minute in the pump test. It says 90% complete for the design, but it's actually 100% complete. And we're just waiting for an updated set that we can bid out. So that'll be bid out in the spring. It's in the current budget year. Want to go to the next one? Here are our rehabilitation projects that we're really, really looking forward to. That's part of that $50 million. If you look, there are fire flow improvement projects. I listed those in our priority. We'd like to do the fire flow first. We'd like to do an AC pipe replacement. Let me explain what AC pipe is. In the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, a popular pipe was made out of asbestos cement, which before they realized it would cause cancer, they made it a great pipe. And as long as it's flowing and it's not in pieces, it's great. But we'd like to remove that out of the ground and replace it with pipe that's not a problem. And we have a list of those repairs. And the last one are the aging pipe repairs, which are mostly lead and copper pipes. Do you want to go to the next slide? I just wanted to talk about the lead and copper rule if you haven't heard about it. A lot of the lead and copper rule came because of what happened in Michigan, where a town switched water sources and they ended up infecting or poisoning the people that they supplied water to with lead and copper. And so the APA made rules about how cities deal with lead and copper in their systems. We are required by federal and soon to be state law to have an inventory of lead and copper by October 2024. I don't think that's going to be a problem. To give you an update, we've already had to give some information to the EPA about our system. Out of our system, we have 2,000 lines, and we have 30,000 lines, but out of 2,000 of those, we're not sure if we have a lead and copper problem or not. So our problem is really looking at those lines and finding out if we have problems with those or not. We're working with GIS to come up with a map, and I believe that we're going to have it before October 2024 that you can look at and see which areas of our city will have concerns with lead and copper. I'm going to tell you this right now. We do have areas of our city that do have problems with lead and copper. I know from testing that that's true. So, and by problems, I mean, it'll be something that we will have to look at, not necessarily replace right now, but they're ones that, because they show tests of positive for lead and for copper, we're going to have to be tracking those all the time until we actually do replace those. After 2024, after we've identified all the pipes, now we need to come up with a monitoring and sampling plan for those pipes that are problematic. So I don't have to look into areas that I don't have any problems or don't have lead and copper pipes. We'll have a monitoring and sampling plan for just those areas where we have concerns with. And then we'll also have to come up with a plan for replacement. One of the things that is new that the EPA rule talked about is if a resident decides, hey, I know I have a little bit of lead and copper, but I don't want any lead and copper, I'm going to replace the service from the meter to the house. The city will be required to replace the line from the meter to the main line as well. So if a resident comes to us and says, I'm doing my part, now you have to do yours, we'll have to do ours whether it's on the budget or not. And they'll give us a time frame, I believe it's 90 days, 45 days, that we'll have to replace that. So I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem with that, but that's something that previously in any of these master plans, we had nothing to deal with something like this, and we'll have to have something to deal with that. Okay. Yay, I got to the questions parts. Now you can go through any part of the report. Remember, this is draft. I appreciate your questions. If you are thinking, oh, Greg doesn't want the questions, no, I want your feedback because you'll get a better report. I've already got some really good questions from Kayleen on this report that I will make the developer and the Bowen and Collins answer who created this report.
All right, now it is our turn. Councilmember Pack.
Well, thank you. Just following up with your concern of lead and copper when you're talking about tracking that, do you anticipate that level rising or diminishing, or it's certainly not at the same level you're talking about with the Michigan incident, but
They've changed how we do the sampling for lead and copper. Uh, there will be in the future rules about taking the samples inside the house. And they'll make us take samples right when it comes out of the tap, a little bit of time after it comes out of the tap, and then a lot longer after it comes out of the tap, so they can figure out where the problem is. When they change those rules, I'll know a whole lot. When we do a real sample like that, I will know a lot better about where those areas are going to be. But if you wonder what areas are we going to have problems with lead and copper, I can tell you anything built before 1980, you should be concerned about. From 80 on, I know it's 88, but from 80 on, our city went to poly service lines earlier than anyone else. And so I think we're going to have a little bit better luck than other places, but anything below 1980, I think any subdivision below 1980 is suspect. And there'll be a lot of that in West Jordan.
When you say the subdivision, the homes built, or when the subdivision first got put in?
When the subdivision first got put
And
in.
how would a homeowner know that?
We'll have it on a map.
Okay.
So in that map that they'll be able to come to our website, they will know. And quite honestly, after 2024, I'll probably be sending them a letter saying that we've identified your area as an area that has a lead and copper service lateral. These are your choices. Salt Lake City is already doing that.
Ouch.
Well, their lines are a little older, and there's more to that story.
Their lines are a lot older than
Yeah,
ours.
most of theirs are way old.
Yeah. But that's what'll happen. So remember I said we have 2,000 lines, so that I'm not quite sure service laterals, and we'll know by 2024, I'll know almost every one of those service laterals, whether they have a lead and copper problem. Or I have to identify them as unknown, and unknown, you might as well say it's got a lead and copper problem.
I would say it's an issue.
Yeah.
I'd use that word in
Yeah.
the future.
Do you mind if Dave Murphy talks about this for a second? He just attended a conference on this and might have a little more knowledge than I do.
Yeah, but he has to have a mic.
Thanks for just a second here. So on this subject, we're looking at what the regulators are trying to basically enforce. And what we'll get to eventually here is a complete removal and replacement in the United States on this subject. So that's what we're preparing for. And that's what the inventory is about, so that they can target money to this problem. They did pass $55 billion in this last year's appropriations for water projects, 15 billion of which is for lead and copper service replacements.
Oh.
So we're going to be going after that money. That money is being distributed to the state DEQs, and we're going to be going after that money as soon as possible, as soon as we can identify and come up programmatically with how much we're going to replace and how soon. We could go after this as far as grant funding in early 2023, mid 2023. So that's what we're gearing up for right now, and we're reviewing all of our stuff and creating databases to go after this subject in town here.
Thank you. That
So
answered 3 of my questions.
It's available coming up this coming year, and DEQ is working on how to distribute that money and what the grant process will be right now.
Speaking as just one member of a body of 7, I'm not comfortable with, I think we need to do this sooner than later. So I appreciate you saying we're going after grant money. I appreciate that we already know where some of the issues are and that we're working towards that, because sometimes just because you can doesn't mean you should. And this is one of those cases. I think we have a lot of data. We know we need to replace these as soon as we can.
As Dave said, like I said, the state of Utah does have a grant program, and they haven't actually, there's no applications they're giving out yet, but when they do give out applications, we'll try and be ahead of the game. We already know areas and that we can submit applications for, so we'll go after that.
And I'm sure that between the two of you,
Yeah.
you kind of know what they'll be asking.
Yeah.
So, thank you. Let Councilmember Pack, thank you. Councilmember McConaughey.
I've just got a little 90-second gee whiz that can wait till the very end, so others can go first.
Okay. Councilmember Green.
I agree with Council Chair Whitelock.
Yeah.
I don't want to wait till the EPA says it has to be done because uh, I trust the federal bureaucracy about as far as I can throw it. And I used to be in one of the departments for a long time. We need to act with all speed because what we're saying is that our goal is to protect West Jordan residents. And whatever that takes as we progress, I think we've got to start that process. And the faster we get it done, the faster we can focus on some of the we can, you know what I mean? The other question that I have, and this is specifically related to page 3-5, and I saw one place that it said we were going to exceed water capacity in 2040, but it's really right around based on their model. We are going to exceed water supply based on the 20 based on our on that curve on 20 on that page. Our water supply is going to out our growth is going to out. Am I reading that wrong?
Outpace our
No,
water
you're not.
supply.
But I'm really careful with water supply. The contracts, we're not gonna find any more groundwater in the city.
Right.
So by us getting more supply, we have to go to Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District. When the city enters into a contract with the Water Conservancy District, it's in perpetuity.
Right.
We can always change it, but so we're really careful about when we pull the trigger on those. We really want to make sure that we don't obligate ourselves because those are take or pay. Those are pay. We pay it no matter whether we use it
Right.
or not. And so we're trying to be really careful. What Bowen and Collins doesn't know is what capacity Jordan Valley has, and Jordan Valley is still trying to figure all of that out. They're still trying to go through and see what they can do with the existing structure they have and the existing water rights that they have. The droughts put a stress on that whole system. The good news, I think, will be that as we get farther out in that, conservation will help us out a lot.
Right. What
Which they're not looking at. They're not looking at conservation.
What
right
I'm
now.
more concerned about is not necessarily what we can get, but depending on that curve and where we fall on that curve, it is very conceivable, given the variables with Jordan Valley Water and the Bear River area and a whole bunch of other nonsense that we have going. But the question is for this council, and maybe this is more of a rhetorical question, but maybe you can help us guide us. What should from here on forward, we know we got 6,000 units already entitled in Jones Ranch, Wood Ranch. We've got, a bunch of other acreage on the southwest quadrant. We've got a couple. What should our growth plan be as we follow that curve out to where there's a delta between the curve and the line? And, I get that line's moving, but where the curve's going to continue to go up, the line's going to, but at some point in time, the curve's going to overcome that line. Where do we have a ballpark of where that's going to be, and how does that affect us looking at growth and entitling projects over the next 2 years to look forward to the next 20? Do you see where I'm going with that? Maybe you can give us a help
I
with
do,
that.
and I think you've expertly found part of the Achilles heel in all of some of this, right? I think that you really should be asking when you rezone a property, what is the storage capacity that we have? Source, you're right. Source and storage. You should be asking, what do I got? What will this take? And how would we do this? When you do a rezone, you are giving an entitlement to a property owner, and unless you have an MDA that says you won't serve, unless they agree to give up some of their rights when they actually build a home, you are saying that you're going to supply that water to them. There may come a point where you have to say, well, we'll have to up our Jordan Valley water agreement, or we can't approve this, or if there's some difficult decisions ahead, as you can see on this graph.
So here's a follow-up to exactly what you just said. Is it wrong for the council, and Alan, you know where I'm gonna go with this. Is it wrong for the council that we ask, require, cajole, whatever it is, that when we have a development that is asking for a rezone change, an upzone change, that we get a reasonable, I'm gonna say detailed, I'll deal with reasonable. Is it reasonable, is it okay, or should we require it in code? You can tell me which way we ought to do it. Should it be in code that we say what we want in our packet is this from utilities department so that we can actually plan for the growth?
Yeah, usually
Okay.
they call it an adequate public facilities ordinance, and we have a little
Okay.
bit one, but it needs to be updated.
Okay,
So that you can feel comfortable. Oh, okay. If I approve this, that you can serve it as
Okay.
a city and as the body who governs this utility. To be
Okay,
honest,
so
as our utility board.
council, do we want Alan to put that on a list to come up for a code addition change? Alan, put that on a upcoming meeting, please.
and maybe Alan, that's just part of we've talked about Title 13 rewrite of the adequate public facilities in 13.
And-
Adequate public facilities not in 13. It's in
14.
no. I think it's a single digit. I'm just trying to look for it right now, but
So
we can-
here's a-
It's there. We have something there today, but other cities have done it better. I think that it was our first version, and the hardest part in West Jordan is we grow so fast that sometimes we're not able to look back and say what's working, what's not working. And that's probably something that would be beneficial to look back and say, what's working, what's not working, not this.
here's a question I have for you. In the report, it says somewhere between 13 to 17 million are needed in the next 10 years. How much of that is already budgeted in our 5 and hopefully 10-year plan? How much addition will we need?
I
to
again,
add?
that's one
And
of
if you don't
the-
know, I want that information before I say anything on
we'll-
this plan.
I'll have them update that and put something in here. I think that, again, because they don't know when build out is, they've squished that. And maybe we need to look at having that be out a little bit more to being something that we can afford. I know that
Okay.
Corbin's got at least 3 million to remove aging and rehabilitating existing water lines coming up in like 2 or 3 years. So the city has been anticipating this, maybe not at the extent that this report suggests, but I would still caution you, these are budgetary numbers. It's really hard for them to guess what they're going to be. And the city tries to do as much cost saving as I can. So if we can do projects and replace service laterals with our crews and not break state law, I'm going to do that as much as I can, because I have those crews anyway. They have to respond to breaks, and we can save a lot of money. So I think I'll have them answer that question, but
Okay.
I think that we're already looking into it. Maybe not the extent that they have here, but we're already looking into this.
And then the prices you showed on when you were showing the zone tanks, are those our costs? Are those the total costs? And developers will be helping with part of that? Or which is it?
That's
Current construction and current budgetary costs. So those totals may have to be updated as well, but it's only.
in the appendix. They show something that shows how much the city is responsible for and how much the developers are responsible for through agreements or impact fees.
Right. I'm just referring you to your slide deck though.
Yeah, my slide didn't go into that, but if you look in the report
Okay.
in Appendix A, you can see every project and how much is supposed to be funded by a private developer or by the city.
And how many today, how many total gallons do we have storage capacity for?
Today, I believe it's 46. Yeah, and I think as we said before, our
46
peak
and a half
day has
million?
been 43. So right now, we have enough storage for one peak day and a little bit more.
Okay, so I just want to state these few facts that Ian, the internet, had fun looking at. Come on, Dave. Sometimes the internet has good information. A human can only survive for about 3 days without water. The average daily water use for a person is about 75 gallons. For West Jordan, taking 116,000 people, that's a lot. That's 800 million. I'm not willing to go down on our current what we require to what the state thinks we need. Just so everyone knows, I just don't think it's wise because, as we've pointed out last time, if something happens and we need to supply residents with water, they can survive without food for 7 days. They cannot survive without water for more than 3. And sure, it wouldn't be 75 gallons per day. They could do a little less, but that's concerning to me. It looks like we're getting close to end time. Councilmember McConaughey?
We can skip if you'd like.
No, we have time. It's only 6:40.
Okay. Alan, do you want to bring up the pictures? Just kind of interesting talking about cataloging and itemize or making sure we know everything we have and replacing some of the pipes that might be a little dated. This I think predates copper and iron. This was not in my backyard, but it was close to my front yard. This was 70th South
It was.
on
Is that 7-Eleven?
May.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an actual water line that
Yeah.
was exposed during
This was
that
dug
project.
up in May 2018, so relatively recently we're finding that. And do you want to go to the next one, Alan?
There's
So,
the lead and copper must be the rebar that's holding it all together. I've never in person. I've never seen a pipe like that until we did that project.
That's baling. That's baling.
Yeah, baling wire.
Yeah, that's creosote on it. That's all kinds of fun things.
It's good that that's been retired.
I know.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Chris. I love that picture.
All right, so I'm sure there are a lot more questions on this report. I'm also confident that not everyone's had the time to review it all the way. So I guess at this point, I have a question for the body. Do we want to resume this after our meeting if we're done by 8? Or do we want to bring it back to another work meeting?
I have no questions.
I'm still going through it, but I don't want to do it today. I can't
Okay.
be here that long.
Okay, so
I agree with
totally okay
Councilmember.
coming
So
back.
I think we'll be inviting you back another day, because before we adopt this, I think we've got some more things we need to.
Yeah.
And I think there's things that I would like you to, like the code. Are there other things? I think you and Mr. Murphy could come up with things. Mr. Murphy could probably come with, But, we would love to hear those things. Because what we want is a good water system. We want to supply clean drinking water for our residents, and we want to ensure that we have it for our residents. And I think all of us would agree. And I want to make sure that we have our budgetary things correct so that people are paying the right amounts. And on that, one thing that I think we need to look at, and maybe you could bring back information, because we mentioned pumps to get water, it takes more pumps to get water uphill. And so is that something, I know we've thrown it around a time or two up here, but maybe it's time to look at, is there an additional charge for people's water that has to be pumped up really far? Because that's costing us more. And I think we need data so we can have a discussion and see politically what we think we should do with that. So, all right.
Yeah, right now, every citizen of the city subsidizes the person higher than they
Right.
are, right? Because of that pumping rate, because we pay more the higher you go up the hills.
And we're getting higher and higher. And with some of the developments that have been
Right.
approved recently or coming online, that could be even higher, right? Higher
Right.
than Highland Drive, higher than,
Plan-
yeah, higher than a lot of these sites. So,
Planning Commission wanted me to look at 2 additional items that we haven't talked about. They wanted us to put in some sort of capital plan or something, a fee study every so often on a periodic rate so that you could be comfortable that the fees you charge are correct. And then the other thing they really wanted me to look at is we have facilities that add chlorine and fluoride to the water. And what would happen if we had a catastrophic failure? So I don't know what I'll do about that last one. That may have to be not in this master plan, but in a separate report. But they wanted me to look at that, and that was a good comment as
We
well
add
by
it
Ammon.
or Jordan Valley Water adds it?
We added as Jordan Valley adds it to all the water we do, but because we have wells,
We add it to our well water.
and the other thing sometimes, especially we might add it at like a pump station or something. The longer the water is in our system, chlorine goes away, and so we need to make sure the chlorine is what protects the citizens from harmful bacteria and viruses, and so we try and keep it in the state approved range. And so again, we do have facilities that add chlorine, and we have facilities that also add fluoride to the water.
Okay.
And so they wanted us to look at that.
That would be great. All right. Well, we will adjourn our committee of the whole.
I move to adjourn.
Have a motion by Councilmember Green, a second by Councilmember Bloom. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Oh, any opposed? There aren't any. We're adjourned.
Hey, so Greg, you